Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Chapter 5 of his prologue to Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Zarathustra, speaking as Nietzsche's mouthpiece, talks about a type or configuration or state of humanity that is a live possibility for us and may in fact be realized for many people in the present. He calls it the last or ultimate man, the letzte Mensch. So this is a final state of humanity, but it's not a good one, and it's being contrasted against another possibility, which is the Übermensch or Superman. And this would be something that we would arrive at through our own, social planning and the gradual work of centuries building up, say, technology or social structures, and it really is a live possibility for us today, perhaps in a way that goes beyond the time that Nietzsche might have envisioned. If you think about the future that's coming for us, with robotics and AI and incredible developments in logistics that could potentially afford us the possibility of never leaving our little apartments unless we happen to be one of the people tinkering around with the robots and systems. So what we call sort of a post-scarcity economy, the way it's being spelled out. One of the ways it could look like would be this picture of the last men, the final state of humanity. And he brings it up in a dramatic situation. The crowd he sees doesn't really want to hear about the Superman. He says, "There they stand," he said to his heart. "There they laugh. They don't understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears." So he goes on and he says, "What's the problem with these? They have something of which they are proud. What is it called that makes them proud?" He says they call it culture. In German, Bildung. Bildung has a sort of double meaning to it. It means culture. It also means education or formation. And in their view, this culture is what makes them better than previous humans who are just a bunch of, barbaric, stupid, counter purposes sort of apes. We have culture, and that allows us to live together as human beings who don't always have to be causing trouble with each other and can get along. Or, when we don't get along, it can be fairly trivial and we can get over it. And, we don't have to be threatened by those who want to bring about exciting things because, culture will keep that at bay. And so he says they're really proud of this. He says they call it culture. It distinguishes them from the goat herds. Therefore, they don't like me talking about contempt, verachten, sort of like being, looking at things, as we say, with a jaundiced eye. They don't like to hear that. It's not nice. And he says they don't want to hear the word contempt spoken of them by relation to the Superman. So I'm going to speak to their pride. Stolz, right? I'm going to speak to what they think is great about themselves. I'm going to tell them about the last men. And you could imagine that Zarathustra maybe has in his mind, I'm going to spell this possibility out for them if they're not going to go for the Superman, where they're going to end up, and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't want that. I'm too good for that." That's not what actually happens, as we see in the end of the section. So what would be going on with this last man? One way of thinking about it is that the human potential becomes weakened, becomes exhausted, and is no longer able to produce the sort of people that at least we are still today. He says that it's time for human beings to fix their goal. It's time to plant the seed of the highest hope. Our soul is still rich enough for it, but one day this soil will still be poor and weak. No longer will a high tree be able to grow up from it. So that's one metaphor right there. We can exhaust the fecundity, the fertility, the capacity to provide nutrients and a locus for something greater to grow out of us. He also says, the time is coming when man will no longer shoot the arrow of his longing out over mankind, and the string of his bow will have forgotten how to twang. Yet another metaphor there for an incapacity to imagine something greater, to desire even something greater than the condition that you have there. And he says, I tell you, one must have chaos in one to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, you still have chaos within you, so you're not totally lost. You're not the last men yet, but you're close. And you have to be careful about that. So what is the last man like? Nietzsche tells us that the last man can no longer despise or feel contempt, verachten, himself. He can no longer tell how badly off he is. As a matter of fact, he thinks that he is better than the people who came before. He's not going to stress it, of course, because that wouldn't be good taste, and why get so worked up over anything like that? So he says, the time is coming when nobody's going to give birth to any more stars. The time of the most contemptible man is coming, the man who can no longer despise himself. I will show you the ultimate man. So now he's going to sketch out the picture of what this person is like. And the metaphor that he uses over here is the last man says things and then blinks. Sort of like, looking in the sun, or they've just woken up from a stupor. They're not really ready for dealing with life. But their life is easy, so they can blink all they want till they get the sleep out of their eyes, and then they get on with something, then they take another nice little nap, right? Or doze off doing what they're doing. So one way of thinking about this is they can no longer place themselves into relation with anything really human, anything really beyond themselves. He says, what is love? Oh, well, love is something that takes us outside of ourselves. When we love something, we're willing to sacrifice it. What is creation? Nothing needs to be created anymore. What is longing? What is desire? What is the, need for something else? And then he says, what is a star? Now, you might say, well, what's that doing in there? All of these things are like human activities, or they are, feelings that we have. Why a star? Well, because a star symbolizes something that we, in previous times, looked to and marveled at and desired to have, even if that's an impossible desire. The last man says, what are these things? I don't care about them. It says, the earth has become small, and upon it hops the ultimate man who makes everything small. Everything becomes trivial. Everything fits into its nice little place, is non-threatening, and can be dealt with. He says, his race is inexterminable as the flea. The ultimate man lives longest. And the ultimate man claims to have found genuine human happiness. We have found happiness. Other people before us were looking for that. How fortunate for us that we actually are happy. So what does a happy life look like for the ultimate man? Nietzsche goes on and tells us. They left the places where living was hard. They like nice warm places. You still love one's neighbor and you rub against them because you need warmth. So they're, social creatures. And he says, sickness and mistrust count as sins with them. You shouldn't be sick, shouldn't be mistrustful. Just go with things. The motto could be, oh man, it's all good, right? He says, a little poison now and then, that produces pleasant dreams. And a lot of poison at last for a pleasant death. And, if you want to kill yourself, that's fine. The world's not going to lose anything, you ultimate man, when you kill yourself. And if you want to poison yourself a little bit so you have some nice dreams, that's cool too, you know? It's your body, your life. He says they still work, but they don't work to produce anything. Work, he says, is entertainment. But they take care the entertainment does not exhaust them. So their lives are lives that are, you know, in large respect, enjoying themselves. They are happy. They get to live in freedom and comfort and, you know, watching streaming shows all they want, you know, consuming content that's created by somebody. And they all perhaps do some work, but not too much. They just work, you know, and have fun with their work. And if it doesn't come out right, that's okay too. It doesn't really matter. They even, he says, have quarrels, but they make sure that their quarrels are soon made up. Otherwise, indigestion would result. It's not like, you know, well, it would destroy society or it would make me a bad person. You just don't want to feel bad about these sorts of things. So you disagree about the aesthetic value. I mean, think about this. You know, we get into arguments about the Marvel universe and, you know, should this cape have gone this way? And people can get really obsessive about that. Now, our people are not last men, so they hold very long grudges about that and write nasty comments to each other, right? And create videos about how this person is completely wrong. But these people would be more like jovial geeks and nerds, and they'd be like, well, you know, I see it differently, but let's all agree to disagree, you know. That's what they see as happiness. And he goes on a little bit more. He says, nobody grows rich or poor anymore. Both are too much of a burden. There are no more social distinctions of any sort. This really does look like what one vision of a post-scarcity economy would resemble, doesn't it? Everybody's taken care of. There's really no meaning to anything. We all just kind of enjoy ourselves. We live until we die, and, you know, that's that. And now, would you really be happy in a situation like that? There are probably a lot of people today who would, in fact, welcome that and say, well, this is exactly what we want. And there were some in Nietzsche's time who are saying that as well. There's one other feature of this world of the last man that we need to talk about. And Nietzsche summarizes it in saying, no herdsman and one herd. There's nobody ruling. There's nobody in charge. There's nobody giving orders. There's just the way things are, and we follow them, and we're all in one big, happy herd or family, to use the metaphor that we use so often here, facetiously and exploitatively. So he says, who still wants to rule? Why would anyone want to rule? Who wants to be in charge of this stuff? That's too much work. Why care about that? Who obey? Both are too much of a burden. He says, everyone wants the same thing. Everyone is the same. Whoever thinks otherwise goes into the madhouse. But they go voluntarily. They're like, well, I guess there must be something wrong with me. I guess I'm not well adjusted. Let's see if we can get me adjusted, and then I can fit in. And this is the only possibility for anybody within that society. That is the situation of the last men. They are happy in their own way, but is it really what we would count as happiness? It sounds good to many people. And Nietzsche tells us that at this point, Zarathustra, ends his first discourse. And at this point, the shouting and mirth of the crowd interrupted him. Give us this ultimate man, O Zarathustra. So they cried, make us into this ultimate man. You can have the Superman. And all the people laughed and shouted. And then Zarathustra gets sad because he's like, I think these people actually do want that. Maybe my words are wasted on them because, if that's really what they want, then how could they possibly understand what I'm telling them about the human race not being finished and us striving to create something greater than ourselves? Instead, they want to go down back into something like a happy, pleasant anthill where we all have our nice, television sets to look at, perhaps virtual reality, and, food that gets brought to us all the time, and nobody ever does anything new or even wants to. This is something that a lot of people have taken from this prologue of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and thought about as well, perhaps this is where we're actually heading if we're not careful.